She threw a $200 crystal glass at me for pouring wine too slowly, but she had no idea what I was about to pour for her in return. My name is Edward Mitchell, 62 years old, and my whole life I believed family was sacred. I'd let my son's family live rent-free in a house worth $2,800 a month, paid every bill, even renovated it to my daughter-in-law's exact specifications. I thought I was doing the right thing, until that evening at their anniversary party, when Stephanie, my daughter-in-law, decided 30 seconds was too long to wait for wine service. In front of 20 guests, she screamed, "This useless old man is ruining my party." I stood there, red wine dripping down my white shirt, crystal shards at my feet, everyone watching in silence. Nobody said a word. But she had no idea I'd just discovered something that would change everything. But before I tell you what I found, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Let me go back 3 years. My wife Margaret passed away from cancer, leaving me alone in this big house we'd built together. We'd worked 35 years to own 3 rental properties. Good, solid investments that kept us comfortable. Brian was our only child, and after Margaret died, he was all I had left. Brian had always struggled. Never quite found his path, you know? He'd tried different jobs, different business ventures. Nothing seemed to stick. When Margaret was sick, he'd come around more, trying to help. But I could see the worry in his eyes. Not just about his mother, but about his own future, too. Then he met Stephanie. She came from money. Real money. The kind of family that belonged to country clubs and drove cars that cost more than most people's houses. But when Brian introduced her to us, she seemed different, down to earth. She told us her family had cut her off for marrying beneath her station. Those were her exact words. I never charged my son rent. When they got married, Stephanie's family didn't show up. Not one person. She cried at the reception, saying she felt abandoned, unwanted. My heart broke for her. This young woman who'd given up everything for my son. Brian lost his job 2 months after the wedding. Some startup that went under. They were living in a tiny apartment, struggling to make ends meet. The stress was eating them alive. That's when Stephanie mentioned that they might have to move across the country, somewhere cheaper. I couldn't let that happen. I couldn't lose my son the way I'd lost my wife. So I made them an offer. "Come live in the Maple Street house," I said. "No rent. Just cover your own food and gas." The Maple Street property was my nicest rental. 2-story colonial with a big backyard, updated kitchen, hardwood floors throughout. I'd been getting $2,800 a month for it. Easy. They moved in a week later. I swore I'd give my son everything his wife had lost. At first it felt good, really good, having family close again. Brian would come over for dinner, help me with yard work. Stephanie seemed grateful, always thanking me, calling me the father she never had. But then she started mentioning little things. The bathroom needed updating. The carpet in the master bedroom looked dated. The kitchen appliances were functioning but not impressive when her friends visited. I found myself saying yes to everything. $15,000 for renovations, new granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, luxury vinyl flooring throughout. I even paid for the interior designer Stephanie insisted we needed. Brian seemed uncomfortable with it all, but he never said anything, just watched as I wrote check after check. I told myself I was investing in their happiness, their future. I was building something for my family. But there were voices in the night I was starting to hear. And what I found in the trash can. The voices started about 6 months after they moved in. Low conversations through the walls late at night. I'd walk by their house during my evening rounds. I like to check on all my properties. And I'd hear Stephanie on the phone. Always when Brian wasn't home. One night, I found receipts in my own trash. Hotel receipts, restaurant bills for expensive places, all charged to credit cards I didn't recognize, but with my address listed as billing. When I asked Stephanie about it, she had explanations for everything. "Oh, that must be from when I was job hunting," she'd say. Or, "Brian and I went out to celebrate his interview." But Brian worked construction now, steady work, but not restaurant that cost $200 for 2 work. I started paying closer attention. Strange cars in their driveway during the day. Different people coming and going. When I asked, Stephanie would wave it off. "Just friends visiting. You know how it is." But I didn't know how it was. Not anymore. Then she started asking for more. "Edward," Stephanie said one morning, standing in my kitchen like she owned it, "we need to talk about upgrading the house a bit more." I looked up from my coffee. "Upgrading? We just spent $15,000. I know, and it looks so much better. But my friends from college are coming to visit next month. Sarah married a doctor. Jennifer's husband is in finance. I just want our place to feel appropriate." What she wanted was a complete living room furniture set, $8,000, plus new window treatments, plus professional landscaping for the backyard. I felt my chest tighten, but I nodded. My credit cards were already carrying more debt than I'd ever had, but what else could I do? This was my family. The bills that month came to $8,500, but that wasn't the end of it. "The guest room really needs work if we're having people stay over," she mentioned a week later. "And honestly, the master bathroom shower is pretty cramped for 2 people. More contractors, more invoices, more trips to Home Depot that somehow always cost twice what I'd budgeted." Then she mentioned needing more private space. The strange cars became more frequent. A blue Honda in the morning, a white pickup in the afternoon, sometimes both at once. I asked Brian about it when he stopped by to borrow my hedge trimmer. "Stephanie's making some new friends," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Good for her, right? She's been lonely since her family, you know." But something felt wrong. I started seeing the same faces, people I didn't recognize coming and going like they lived there. Young professional types mostly. They'd wave politely if they saw me, but they had keys to my house. One evening I found extra sets lying on the kitchen counter when I stopped by to fix a leaky faucet. 4 keys on different rings, each labeled with a room number. Master, guest, office, den. "What are these for?" I asked Stephanie. "Oh, those." She swept them into her purse quickly. "I'm watching them for a friend who's moving. You know how it is when you're between apartments. But I'd been a landlord for 15 years. I knew what labeled keys looked like. And I knew what they meant. The mysterious keys in the kitchen, and voices of strangers in rooms I'd forbidden. That's when I started finding documents. Legal papers with my signature. Except the signature didn't look like mine. Bank statements showing transactions I didn't remember making. Applications for credit lines that I'd never applied for. One evening, while fixing their garbage disposal, I found a crumpled loan application in their kitchen trash. $150,000 personal loan from First National Bank. The borrower's name, Stephanie Mitchell. The co-signer, Edward Mitchell. My signature at the bottom looked close, but not right. The E was too small. The final D curved the wrong way. "Stephanie," I called into the living room, "can you come here for a minute?" She appeared in the doorway, designer yoga outfit, fresh manicure. "What's up?" I held up the paper. "Did you know about this?" Her face didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. "Oh, that. I asked you to sign that last month, remember? For the emergency fund we talked about, in case Brian gets laid off again? But I'd never signed anything, and we'd never talked about any emergency fund. The signature wasn't mine. Then I got the call from the bank. 'Mr. Mitchell, this is Jennifer from First National Bank. I'm calling about your loan application that we received yesterday. We just need to verify a few details before approval.' My blood went cold. What loan application? The personal loan for $150,000. You're listed as the primary borrower, with Mrs. Stephanie Mitchell as the co-applicant. She brought the paperwork in personally." I sat down hard in my kitchen chair. "I never applied for any loan." Long pause. "Sir, we have your signature here," and Mrs. Mitchell provided 2 forms of ID showing her address as 847 Maple Street, which matches your property records. 847 Maple Street. My house. My property that I'd let them live in rent-free. "Can you tell me," I said slowly, "how much Mrs. Mitchell said this loan was for?" "The application shows it's for home improvements and debt consolidation. Standard procedure for property owners looking to increase rental income. Rental income on the house where they lived for free." After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time. Then I walked over to 847 Maple Street and let myself in with my key. What I found in their bedroom made everything clear. $2,400 per month she was collecting from 2 rooms. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. The rental agreements were hidden in Stephanie's jewelry box. Neat little contracts, professionally printed. Room rental agreement, 847 Maple Street. 2 separate leases, $1,200 each per month. Current tenants: Marcus Williams, master bedroom; Jennifer Chen, guest bedroom. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. My house. My property. And she was collecting $2,400 every month while telling me they couldn't afford groceries. But the papers got worse. Subletting agreements. Utility sharing arrangements. Even a document titled House Rules for Tenants. Rules for living in my own house. At the bottom of the stack, I found something that made my hands shake. A real estate consultation report. Market analysis, 847 Maple Street. Estimated value, $420,000. Potential monthly rental income, $3,200. $3,800. Someone had been planning this for a long time. I photographed everything with my phone, put the papers back exactly where I'd found them, and walked home. My head was spinning. How long had this been going on? How much money had she already collected? But that was when she started calling me the old servant. Then I heard what she'd said when she thought I couldn't hear. "Can you believe I have to deal with that old man every day?" Stephanie's voice carried through the windows as I watered my garden next door. She was on the phone in their backyard, probably thinking I was inside. No, he has no idea. Brian's too weak to tell him anything, and Edward's too stupid to figure it out. I've got them both wrapped around my finger. I froze, garden hose still running. The plan's working perfectly. By Christmas, I'll have enough documented rental income to qualify for the mortgage buyout. Then we can get rid of the old fool permanently. My mouth went dry. What? No, Brian won't be a problem. He'll do whatever I tell him. He's terrified I'll leave him, and he'll have to crawl back to Daddy. She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. As if I'd ever let that happen, not when there's this much money involved. I stood there for another 10 minutes, listening to her detail exactly how she planned to use the rental income history to secure a mortgage, buy my house out from under me, and have me evicted from my own property. When she mentioned they needed me to sign more documents, and the laptop plan she was hiding, I started paying attention to everything. Every conversation, every document she asked me to sign, every explanation she gave for the strange people coming and going. "Edward, I need you to sign this insurance update," she said one Tuesday morning, sliding papers across my kitchen table. "Just standard stuff, making sure the house is properly covered." But I read every line this time. Property transfer authorization, tenant notification agreements, emergency contact changes that would make Stephanie the primary contact for everything related to 847 Maple Street. "I need to think about this," I said. Her smile got tight. "It's just paperwork, Edward. Brian's already signed his part." That night, I called my lawyer friend Tom. We'd gone to high school together, and he'd handled my real estate transactions for years. "Tom, if someone forged my signature on a loan application, what would happen? Identity theft, fraud, could be federal charges depending on the amount. Why? And if someone was subletting my property without permission, that's lease violation, potentially theft of services. Edward, what's going on?" I told him everything. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. "Edward, you need to act fast. If she's documenting rental income on your property, she could have grounds for an adverse possession claim. She wanted me to sign over ownership rights." Then came the night I heard the phone call. I was returning a borrowed ladder to their garage when I heard Stephanie's voice through the kitchen window. "No, we stick to the timeline. Edward signs the power of attorney next week. Then we initiate the nursing home evaluation." My blood turned to ice. The documented pattern of confusion and financial irresponsibility should be enough. I've got 3 months of him signing things without reading them. Plus, the neighbor will testify that he's been forgetful lately. What neighbor? What pattern? Brian's on board. He thinks it's for his father's own good. Poor old man can't manage his finances anymore. Needs professional care. Once Edward's in Sunset Manor, we file for conservatorship. Conservatorship. They wanted legal control over everything I owned. The house sale should close within 60 days after that. $420,000 minus the mortgage buyout leaves us about $300,000 clear. Split 3 ways like we agreed. 3 ways. Brian was part of this. Don't worry about Edward. By the time he figures out what happened, we'll be in the Bahamas with our nest egg. I stood in that garage for 20 minutes after she hung up,
my hands shaking, my own son, my own flesh and blood. I was setting a trap she couldn't escape, but first she crossed the final line. The anniversary party was my idea. Stupid, looking back. I thought maybe if I did something nice, something generous, it might bring us all back together. Remind them that family mattered more than money. I offered to host it at my house. Let me cook dinner for everyone. Invite your friends. We'll celebrate properly. Stephanie's eyes lit up, but not in a good way. Actually, Edward, would you mind if we used your place but had it catered? I've got some people I'd like to impress. I should have said no. Instead, I watched her transform my living room into some kind of society showcase. Rented furniture. Professional florist. A bartender who charged more per hour than some people make in a day. 20 of her friends showed up. Not our friends. Not family friends.
Her friends from her old life. The people she was trying to prove herself to. And from the moment they walked in, she treated me like hired help. Edward, can you take their coats? Edward, make sure everyone has drinks. Edward, we're running low on appetizers. I told myself it was just for one night. Just to make her happy. The $200 crystal glasses gleamed. I had no idea one of them would come flying at my face. The party was in full swing by 7 o'clock. Stephanie's friends filled my living room, lawyers, doctors, investment bankers, people in expensive clothes making small talk about vacation homes and stock portfolios. I moved between them with a tray of wine glasses, feeling invisible. They'd glance at me when they needed their glasses refilled, but otherwise I might as well have been furniture. Stephanie, a blonde woman in a designer dress, called out, "Your place looks amazing. I love what you've done with it." "Thank you, Sarah. We've put a lot of work into making it perfect."
We, as if she'd paid for a single renovation. "And who's this?" Sarah gestured toward me as I reached for her empty glass. "Oh, that's Edward. He helps out around the house." Helps out, in my own house. I said nothing, kept moving, kept serving, but something was building in my chest, a pressure I'd never felt before. By 9 o'clock my hands were shaking slightly, not from age, not from nerves, from pure, suppressed rage. Every Edward do this and Edward get that felt like a slap. But I kept quiet, kept serving, because family was supposed to matter more than pride. Then came the wine incident, 30 seconds. That's how long it took to change everything. "Edward!" Stephanie's voice cut across the room like a whip. "We need more wine at table 3, now." I was already heading that way, bottle in hand. But I was moving at my normal pace, the pace of a 62-year-old man who'd been on his feet for 4 hours.
Apparently that wasn't fast enough. "Seriously? Can you move any slower?" The room started to go quiet. Conversations died mid-sentence. Everyone turned to watch. I reached the table, started pouring for the first guest. My hands were steady. My pour was perfect. But I was taking my time, being careful not to spill on anyone's expensive clothes. "Oh my God, this is embarrassing," Stephanie announced to the entire room. "Look at him. Look how slow he is." The guest I was serving, a man in a $1,000 suit, looked uncomfortable. "Stephanie, he's doing fine." "No, he's not. This is supposed to be an elegant evening, and he's making us look like amateurs." I moved to the second guest, poured their wine, still careful, still steady. That's when Stephanie snapped. "You useless old man! You're ruining my party!" The crystal glass left her hand in a perfect arc, $200 worth of imported crystal, filled with red wine. It hit me square in the face. Crystal shards exploded against my cheek. Red wine splashed like blood across my white shirt. 20 pairs of eyes stared in absolute silence. The silence stretched forever. Wine dripped from my face onto my collar, mixing with the warm wetness I realized was blood from where the crystal had cut me. Nobody moved. 20 people, frozen like statues, staring at an old man humiliated in his own home. I looked at Brian, my son, waiting for him to say something, anything. He stared at his plate. "Well," said someone finally, "I think we should probably—" But they didn't finish the sentence. I set down the wine bottle very carefully on the table, pulled a napkin from the settings and dabbed at my face. The cut wasn't deep, but it stung. "Excuse me," I said quietly, and I walked to my kitchen 20 feet away, but feeling like 20 miles. Behind me, I heard Stephanie's voice, smaller now, trying to explain. "He's been having some issues lately." Confusion. Slow reflexes. I'm so sorry you all had to see that. Issues. That's what 3 years of generosity had become. I stood at my kitchen sink, looking out at the garden Margaret and I had planted together. Red wine stained my hands as I washed the blood from my face. I didn't say anything, didn't yell, didn't argue, but I'd made my decision. That night, I started planning. The party ended quickly after that. I could hear cars starting in my driveway, polite goodbyes, the awkward shuffle of people trying to leave without making things worse. Stephanie appeared in my kitchen doorway around 11. Edward, I'm sorry about tonight. I was stressed, and you were moving so slowly, and my friends were... Your friends saw you throw a glass at a 62-year-old man. It wasn't like that. In my house, that I let you live in for free. She opened her mouth, then closed it. For maybe the first time since I'd known her, Stephanie had nothing to say. I think you should go home now, I said. This is about more than tonight, isn't it? Her voice was getting smaller. You're upset about something else. I turned to face her, really looked at her. This woman I'd bent over backwards to help. This woman who'd been stealing from me for months while calling me family. Go home, Stephanie. She started to say something else, but something in my expression stopped her. She backed out of the kitchen, and a few minutes later I heard their front door close. I sat in my kitchen until 3 a.m, thinking. By sunrise, I knew exactly what I needed to do. Security footage had recorded everything, and I knew exactly how to use it. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that crystal glass spinning through the air, felt the wine hit my face, heard the silence that followed. But mostly, I heard Stephanie's voice from earlier that week. Poor old man can't manage his finances anymore. At 6 a.m., I went to my computer and started researching. Property law, landlord rights, financial fraud penalties, subletting violations. By 8 a.m., I had a plan. I walked over to 847 Maple Street with my key. Let myself in quietly. They were both still asleep upstairs. I could hear Stephanie's voice drifting down, probably on another phone call. I went straight to the security panel by the front door. My security panel, that I'd installed when I first bought the property. The system that had been recording everything for the past 6 months. The footage was all there. Every conversation in the backyard. Every stranger coming and going with keys. Every rental transaction. And last night, the entire humiliation, recorded in perfect digital clarity. I copied everything to a USB drive. Then I went to the spare bedroom that Marcus Williams was supposedly renting, found his rental agreement in the nightstand drawer, copied that too. Same with the guest room. By 10 a.m. I had documentation of 8 months of illegal subletting, $19,200 in stolen rental income, forged signatures on bank documents, and video evidence of assault. What I found was worse than I thought. But the master plan was even bigger. The bank documents were the smoking gun. I'd always wondered how Stephanie afforded her designer clothes, her spa treatments, her expensive dinners when Brian was working construction. Now I knew. The loan application wasn't just for $150,000. It was part of a larger package. Home equity line of credit, business loan for property management services, even a credit card with my house as collateral. All with my forged signature. Total amount, $275,000. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the timeline I found in her laptop bag. Yes, I went through their things. I was done respecting privacy. Month 1, 6, establish rental income history. Month 7, 9, secure financing using property equity. Month 10, initiate conservatorship proceedings. Month 11, property transfer to new management. Month 12, liquidate assets, relocate. I was looking at a calendar for stealing my entire life. Brian's signature was on half the documents. My own son had been planning to have me declared incompetent so they could sell my house and disappear with the money. The recorded rental income of $2,400 per month times 8 months equals $19,200 stolen, but the insurance fraud scheme brought it to $95,000. I called Tom at 7 a.m. Tom, it's Edward. I need to know my options. All of them. Slow down. Tell me what you found. I walked him through everything. The forged signatures, the illegal subletting, the assault last night, the conservatorship plan. When I finished, Tom was quiet for a long time. Edward, this is serious criminal territory. Identity theft, fraud, elder abuse, assault. She could be looking at federal charges. What about my son? If he signed documents knowing they contained forged signatures, he's an accessory. But Edward... Tom's voice softened. You understand that pursuing this means pressing charges against your own family? I looked out my window at 847 Maple Street. My house, where strangers were living in rooms they'd paid my daughter-in-law to rent, where my son had helped plan my own financial destruction. They stopped being my family when they started stealing from me. Okay, here's what we do. Document everything. File police reports for the fraud and assault. Initiate immediate eviction proceedings for lease violations. And Edward, you might want to change your locks. Landlords have the right to immediate possession. 72 hours. That's all the time she had. I spent the entire day preparing my case like a prosecutor. Every document copied and organized. Every video file time-stamped and labeled. Every fraudulent transaction highlighted and cross-referenced. By evening, I had a folder 3 inches thick. Then I did something I'd never done before in 15 years of being a landlord. I drafted an immediate eviction notice. Notice to quit and deliver up possession of premises. To Stephanie Mitchell, Brian Mitchell, and all other occupants of 847 Maple Street. The legal language felt cold, but it was precise. Lease violations, unauthorized subletting, property damage, assault on landlord, fraudulent use of premises for commercial purposes. You are hereby required to quit and deliver up possession of the above-described premises within 72 hours. I printed 3 copies, one for them, one for my lawyer, one for the court. My hands weren't shaking anymore. For the first time in months, I felt calm, clear, like the man I used to be before I started trying so hard to be the father Stephanie claimed she'd never had. That's when I remembered the security recording from last night, the crystal glass, the humiliation. 20 witnesses. Evidence had been gathered. The trap was set. I waited until morning. Let them think they'd gotten away with it. Let Stephanie believe her tears and apologies had worked, that old Edward was back to being the pushover she could manipulate. At exactly 9 a.m., I knocked on the door of 847 Maple Street. Brian answered, looking sheepish. Hey, Dad, about last night? I need to speak with both of you. Now. They sat on the couch I'd bought them, looking like children called to the principal's office. I remained standing. I know about the subletting, I said quietly. I know about the forged bank documents. I know about the conservatorship plan. Stephanie's face went white. Brian looked confused. Dad, what are you talking about? I opened my folder and pulled out the rental agreements, set them on the coffee table. Marcus Williams and Jennifer Chen, $1,200 each per month, 8 months of rental income on my property. Edward, I can explain. The loan application for $150,000 with my forged signature. Brian picked up the document, stared at it. Stephanie? What is this? The plan to have me declared incompetent so you could sell my house. Now I held the power, but she still didn't understand what she was facing. This is all a misunderstanding, Stephanie said, but her voice was shaking. Those rental agreements were just... I was helping out some friends who needed a place to stay temporarily. At $1,200 per month? I wasn't keeping the money. It was going toward expenses, house maintenance, utilities. I pulled out my utility bills. I've been paying the utilities, Stephanie, same as always. Brian was staring at the loan application like it was written in a foreign language. Stephanie, did you really forge Dad's signature? It's not forgery if I had permission. I never gave you permission. You were confused that day, remember? You signed a bunch of papers for me, insurance stuff, but I'd never been confused. Not once, and we all knew it. I placed the eviction notice on the table between us. Official court papers with raised seals and official language. You have 72 hours to vacate the premises. Stephanie grabbed the papers, scanning them quickly. You can't do this. This is our home. This is my house. And you've violated every term of our agreement. What agreement? We don't have a lease. Exactly, which means you're month-to-month tenants, and I can terminate for cause immediately. The police report has been filed. Banks have been notified about the forged documents. Edward, please. Stephanie's composure was cracking. "Let's talk about this reasonably. Maybe we can work something out." "The time for talking ended when you threw a glass at my face. I was stressed. I'm sorry. It won't happen again." "You're right. It won't. Because you won't be here." Brian finally found his voice. "Dad, this seems extreme. Can't we—" "Brian." I turned to face my son. "Did you know about the conservatorship plan?" His face told me everything. The guilt, the shame, the knowledge that he'd been caught. "She said it was for your own good, that you were getting confused, making bad financial decisions, like letting my family live rent-free in a $2,800 house. Dad, like spending $15,000 on renovations you asked for. We never asked. Like paying every utility bill while you collected $2,400 a month from illegal tenants." The room went silent. Even Stephanie had stopped trying to defend herself. I pulled out my phone and showed them the security footage from last night. 20 people witnessed the assault. The police have a copy of this video." Stephanie lunged for my phone. "Delete that." "Too late. It's already been submitted as evidence." Failed attempts to explain the forgery. Reality was setting in. Over the next 48 hours, I watched their world collapse. First, Stephanie's lawyer refused to take her case. Apparently, financial fraud against elderly family members wasn't the kind of publicity his firm wanted. Then the bank froze all accounts connected to the fraudulent loan applications, including the account where Stephanie had been depositing her illegal rental income. The friends she'd been subletting to disappeared overnight. Turns out they'd been paying cash, and when they realized the police might get involved, they found other arrangements quickly. Brian tried calling me 3 times. I let it go to voicemail. "Dad, please. I know this looks bad, but Stephanie was just trying to help secure our future. She didn't mean any harm." No harm. $275,000 in fraudulent loans, 8 months of stolen rental income, a plan to have me declared incompetent and steal my house. No harm at all. On the second day, I found Stephanie sitting in her car in my driveway at midnight, just sitting there, staring at my house. I turned on my porch light and watched her through the window until she drove away. The wealthy friends turned their backs. Time was running out. On the morning of the 3rd day, I called the moving company. "I need a truck at 847 Maple Street in 2 hours. The tenants will have their belongings ready for pickup." "Where are they moving to?" "That's not my concern." I also called the utility companies. "Please disconnect service to 847 Maple Street effective immediately." "Yes, I understand they're still living there. The account is in my name and I'm terminating service." By noon they had no electricity, no heat, no water. At 1 p.m. the sheriff's deputy arrived with the final eviction order. I watched from my front window as Brian and Stephanie loaded their belongings into a U-Haul truck. It didn't take long. Most of the furniture belonged to the house, furniture I'd bought for them. Stephanie kept looking toward my house, probably hoping I'd come out and stop this. Offer some last-minute compromise. Let her explain one more time how this was all a misunderstanding. But I'd learned something important over the past 3 days. Boundaries weren't cruel. Boundaries were necessary. At 3 p.m., Brian walked across the yard to my front door. I watched him hesitate, hand raised to knock, then walk away. At 4 p.m., their truck pulled out of the driveway. Everything had been arranged. The final day had come. I didn't watch them leave. Couldn't. Whatever else had happened, Brian was still my son, and despite everything, walking away from family, even family that had betrayed me, felt like losing part of myself. Instead, I sat in my kitchen and listened. The diesel engine of the moving truck, car doors slamming, voices calling back and forth, though I couldn't make out the words. Then silence. I waited another hour before walking over to 847 Maple Street with my key. The house felt different. Bigger somehow without their belongings filling it. But also emptier in ways that had nothing to do with furniture. They'd left it clean, I'll give them that. Dishes washed. Floors swept. Like they were trying to leave things on a good note, even after everything. On the kitchen counter, I found an envelope with my name on it. Inside, both sets of keys and a note from Brian. "Dad, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am. I hope someday you can forgive me. Brian." No note from Stephanie. I stood in that empty house for a long time, thinking about the difference between forgiveness and trust, about family and boundaries, about the price of kindness without limits. She begged, but it was too late. But the story wasn't over. The eviction was carried out exactly as the law required. Sheriff's deputies arrived at 8 a.m. with the final court order. I watched from my kitchen window as Stephanie tried one last time to negotiate. "This is elder abuse," she screamed at the deputy. "He's confused.
He doesn't understand what he's doing." But the deputy had seen the evidence file, the forged documents, the subletting contracts, the security footage of the assault. "Ma'am, you need to leave the premises now, or you'll be arrested for trespassing." The neighbors came out to watch. 3 years they'd seen strangers coming and going from my house. Now they were seeing why. Mrs. Rodriguez from across the street walked over as the moving truck was being loaded. "Edward, I had no idea what was happening over there. If I'd known—" "It's not your fault, Maria. That poor young man," she said, watching Brian carry boxes. "He looks devastated." The sheriff arrived with the eviction order, neighbors watching from their yards. Stephanie's final breakdown. Brian made one last attempt to reach me. He came to my front door while Stephanie was arguing with the deputies. "Dad, please. I know we screwed up. I know Stephanie went too far, but I'm your son." I looked at him through the screen door. My boy. The child Margaret and I had raised to be honest, to be kind, to treat people with respect. You helped her plan to have me declared incompetent. I thought, she said you were making bad decisions, that you needed protection. From what? From my own generosity? Dad, you watched her throw a glass at my face and said nothing. His shoulders sagged. I know. You signed papers to help her steal my house. I was trying to secure our future by destroying mine. We stood there for a moment, the screen door between us feeling like an ocean. I love you, Dad. That hasn't changed. Love isn't enough anymore, Brian. He walked away then, got in the passenger seat of Stephanie's car and didn't look back. Brian forced to choose sides. Realization of father's generosity. Decision to leave with wife. At 2 p.m., the house was empty again. I walked through every room, checking for damage, making notes for the cleaning service I'd already scheduled. They'd left it in better condition than I'd expected. No holes in walls, no stains on carpets. Even the bathroom they'd renovated was spotless. In the master bedroom closet, I found something they'd forgotten. A small photo album, fallen behind the built-in drawers. Pictures of Brian and Stephanie's wedding. Their honeymoon. Happy times when I'd believed we were building something together. I sat on the edge of the bed and flipped through the photos. In several of them, I was there, smiling, proud. The father-in-law who was so grateful to have a daughter again. The last photo was from Christmas 2 years ago. All 3 of us around my tree, opening presents I'd bought with money I couldn't really afford. We looked like a family. I closed the album and left it on the kitchen counter. Maybe they'd come back for it someday. Maybe they wouldn't. Keys returned in my palm. The house belonged to me. But the family was gone forever. That evening I called the property management company I'd used before. "Edward, good to hear from you. How's the family situation working out?" "It's not. I need 847 Maple Street back on the rental market immediately." "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Family situations can be complicated. Can you have it listed by tomorrow?" "Sure. Same terms as before? $2,800 a month?" "Make it $3,200. The house has been upgraded significantly. Within a week, I had 3 qualified applicants, professional couples, people with references and credit scores and security deposits, people who understood that renting someone's property was a privilege, not a right. I chose a young married couple, both teachers. They reminded me of Margaret and me when we were starting out. Respectful, grateful, understanding that someone else's generosity wasn't something to exploit. For the first time in 3 years, I slept through the night, but the consequences were just beginning. Now, before I tell you what happened next, I want to ask you something. What would you do if you discovered your own family was planning to steal everything from you? Would you confront them immediately, or would you plan your response carefully? Let me know in the comments below. The criminal charges moved forward quickly. Financial fraud, elder abuse, identity theft. The prosecutor called it a textbook case of systematic exploitation. Stephanie's credit was destroyed within a month. No apartment complex would rent to someone with pending fraud charges. No bank would give her a loan. Her name was on every tenant screening service in the county. She ended up in a weekly motel room on the outskirts of town. I heard this from Mrs. Rodriguez, who'd run into her at the grocery store.
She looked terrible, Edward. Thin, tired. He asked if I knew whether you'd be willing to drop the charges. What did you tell her? That some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. The legal system was thorough. Asset seizure to recover the stolen rental income, restitution orders, probation conditions that prohibited contact with elderly residents. Her criminal record would follow her forever. Her reputation in the community was destroyed. Brian called me 6 months later. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Dad, it's me. Hello, Brian. I wanted you to know that I've left Stephanie, filed for divorce. I'm living in a studio apartment downtown. I said nothing. I've been thinking about what happened, about what I did, and I understand now. You weren't confused. You weren't making bad decisions. You were just kind. And we took advantage of that. His voice broke a little. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I see it clearly now. What we did to you. What I let happen. Brian, I miss you, Dad. I miss our family. But I know that's my fault. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time. Forgiveness and trust were different things. Love and respect were different things. Maybe someday we could rebuild something, but it would have to be on new terms. My son calling to apologize. Understanding the full scope of betrayal. A year later, the community knew the whole story. Property owners warning each other about subletting scams. Elderly residents sharing information about financial fraud warning signs. I'd become something I never expected, a cautionary tale with a happy ending. My new tenants at 847 Maple Street were perfect. They paid on time, maintained the property, respected boundaries. They sent me Christmas cards and invited me to their backyard barbecues. Sometimes I'd see Brian around town. We'd nod politely, but we didn't speak. The wound was too fresh, the trust too broken. Stephanie disappeared entirely. Some said she'd moved to another state. Others thought she was still in the county somewhere, starting over under a cloud of criminal conviction. I didn't care where she was. My life was peaceful again. My boundaries were clear. My property was protected. 1 year later, everything had changed. Community learning the truth about what happened. Edward's vindication in the eyes of neighbors. Now I know the difference between kindness and foolishness, between generosity and enabling, between family loyalty and self-preservation. My new tenants respect me because I respect myself. They follow the lease because the lease has consequences. They treat my property well because they know housing is a privilege, not a right. I still have the security recording from that night. 17 minutes of audio and video stored safely in my file cabinet. Not because I enjoy reliving the humiliation, but because it reminds me of something important. Boundaries aren't cruel. Boundaries are necessary. Brian still calls once a month. Brief conversations. He's working steady construction jobs, living within his means, rebuilding his life without Stephanie's manipulation. Maybe someday we'll have a real relationship again. Maybe not. But it will be on terms of mutual respect, not exploitation. The crystal glass that shattered that night taught me something valuable. Sometimes things have to break completely before they can be properly rebuilt. I learned that kindness without boundaries isn't kindness at all. It's just another word for being taken advantage of. And I'm never going back to that version of myself again. If this story resonated with you, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. I share stories like this every week, stories about people who learn to set boundaries and reclaim their power. And remember, kindness without boundaries isn't kindness. It's enabling. Until next time, protect what's yours.